Okay, our first question for tonight is do you support reparations for American descendants of slaves / Foundation of Black Americans? Do you support reparations, and do you support the St. Paul Recovery Act? And what do you know about both?
So I do believe that there have been injustices that have been going on in our St. Paul, particularly in the redlining of the Rondo community. So this is where the highways are being built and sort of dividing the community. I think one of those things that I would support for reparations is like, how do we build stronger communities? So for example, when we talk to folks that grew up before the pre-redlining, they told about how strong the connections are with the community members. So for example, the Reconnect Rondo project, the Reconnect Rondo Bridge project, is actually going to be focusing on creating local businesses in the community that's Black-led and etc. So I think that's where, you know, I think what we should allocate is how do we spend that money to really build locally. I think that's where the big focus is. But to recognize also that home ownership. So with redlining, what it does is that it lowers the value of property within that spaces. So those community members who are impacted, we have to do, I would say, an investigation to determine who are those people impacted and how do you help them put them in that way.
Okay, so just to clarify that, Abu, do you support reparations and the St. Paul Recovery Act?
I would have to look at more details on what that aid is. I just make that sort of perfectly clear, because it's not a blank check, because that's not addressing the real needs of the community. It is building value, it is building businesses, it is building jobs.
Okay, thank you, Abu. Yeah, thank you.
Next.
Okay, we can move right on. We can move right on to Paul. Again, Paul, do you understand the question, or do you need it repeated to you?
Why don't you repeat it, because it's an important question.
Okay.
And I want to address every detail of that question.
Okay.
This affects all of us.
The question is do you support reparations for American descendants of slaves / Foundation of Black Americans? And do you support the St. Paul Recovery Act? And what do you know about both?
The short answer is yes. The way that this government works is we have a representative government. That means the St. Paul City Council represents their constituents. And the vote was 7-0. It was unanimous. That tells me this is what the people want. This is what's important to the residents of St. Paul. And if it's important to the people of St. Paul, it's important to me as mayor. As mayor, I will listen to the people. I was given 2 ears and 1 mouth. That means I'm meant to listen twice as much as I speak. That means that as mayor of St. Paul, I represent the people of St. Paul. I want to know what's important to them. I want to know how they want the city to lead, because I'm going to be that leader.
Thank you.
We'll make those things happen.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
All right?
Okay, David, this is on behalf of Dora, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so
yes,
this answer will be on behalf of Dora, who is running for mayor.
Yeah. Okay. So we are in support of the St. Paul Recovery Act and reparations. And let me ask you just a question here. Is that going to go to individuals?
Yes, we are talking about individuals.
We're talking about individuals,
yes,
right?
Yes, yeah.
So and I'm happy to hear that the St. Paul City Council on a 7-0 vote felt like that people of African American descent needed to be made whole on the things that had happened in the past and to make that right. And so as Dora Jones Robinson being your St. Paul mayor, we will have a system and a program to help people invest that money in order for you to be able to continue to be successful, because it's one thing for somebody to write you a check and for you to get some money, but if you don't know how to invest it, then you could just end up back in the same position that you are. So our administration will help you do that and be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Bill, did you need me to repeat the question, or you kind of got it down
No,
there?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I think it's a sad thing that Mayor Carter isn't here.
Right, yes, right.
Yes, definitely.
I'm gonna, I'll always tell you how I'm thinking about things, okay? I care about every one of you, anybody who's door knocked the city and let flyers here for the last 229 days. You can't make up that type of work ethic and care and concern for the well-being of those people of this city. Having talked to thousands of people, the subject of I'll always be honest with you, the subject of reparations has come up with many times, not only with Caucasians, but with many African Americans that I've talked to. This is not on their radar. They see it as very problematic. They think there's a lot more important issues. I'm not negating what you're asking. I'm just telling you what people are conveying. They think there's so many other issues in the city that are more achievable than this. Again, my ancestors did not come to America until 1900. If you look at the population of St. Paul, Minnesota, easily 3/4 of the population here came to America post. Somebody's laughing up there. Okay, I'm 3/4 of the city of St. Paul was not here pre-Civil War. The legalities of making this reality. There's going to be a lot of legal issues concerning this, and based upon the input I've received from thousands of people, and this is not something made up.
We're not talking about the ancestors, we're talking about the government.
Hold on a second. Could you
We're going to have questions afterward.
Finish off the answer, Bill?
Yeah.
Go ahead and finish off the answer. You got about 30 seconds left.
Again, your leader should have been here today and he wasn't. I'm telling you the truth, okay? I cannot support it based upon the input from the citizens of this city. Thank you.
Okay. So that is a no, Bill? Yes, okay. Okay, Miki, do you need the question to you again, or?
No, I don't, because it's a yes. It's right off. It's a yes because it's what's needed. It's because not only is it what's needed, I supported enough where I've been at some of those meetings with Nick and some of the other guys, Trahern, the guys that have been fighting for this to take place. I'm there because I believe that not only our people, but any people that have went through the atrocities that we all have in this country for years should be paid back for those feelings, those emotions, those losses that we all have took. And I'm not ashamed enough to stand up and say that, yes, I stand behind this in some type of fear of losing a vote and standing for what is right. To me, I will always stand for what is right, despite if that means losing a vote for something else. With the title of mayor on top of my head at nighttime, I will not be able to sleep right knowing that I took this title without being true to myself and true to us as people. That's something that I refuse to do, because not only do African Americans need the descendants of slaves need reparations, but any and every, whether we want to talk about the Indians that lost so much, we need to stop feeling as if one group of people are superior enough to say nobody else deserves anything because of a country that was built by all of us. No, a lot of the country was built by those very people. You mean to tell me that they don't deserve some type of reparation or some type of reward for sitting and losing and doing all the things that they've done?
30 seconds, Miki. 30 seconds.
Well, I don't need no more time because the answer is yes. And I stand behind that.
Thank you, Miki. Thank you, candidates, for answering that first question efficiently. We're going to move on to the second question. The second question is, what is your plan economically for Black people in St. Paul? And can you name one resource you could provide to them as mayor? Miki, we'll start up with you from the top, and we'll just go down the line.
Okay. Repeat it one more time.
Okay. The question is what is your plan for Black people specifically, economically in St. Paul? And could you name one resource you could provide for them as mayor?
First thing is, I'm the founder of the 8 to 18 Truth Centers. I have a couple of them across the city that help with the violence, and they mentor kids, and they're here to support the change that we need. So one of the issues that we have is obviously the violence that's taking place. So what my organization does is we go out and we find those individuals that are shooting at each other and having these issues, and we get them to come and sit down at the center and squash those beefs before they end up turning it into something that is becoming too familiar here in our community. So for one, I want to be able to say that, you know, resource-wise, there is countless amounts of grants and money that is out there that can be used to give our people what we need as far as to change what's going on in those communities. So if you take some of the grants and you say, okay, we want to be able to pay stipends, if that is, to some of these kids that are doing some of these crimes, and let them know that, hey, we can give you some help, we can give you some jobs, you know, you can come and be mentors. Because one thing that I think that we can turn around and help with is taking these individuals, whether you're young or old, and you have made a bad choice in life, you're still of value to this community. So why not start taking some of these guys that have some less than perfect records and use those guys to go back and mentor some of the kids that are starting to go down those wrong paths. You know, we have to stop saying just because you did something in your past that you're no longer of value to our community. That's a lie. We can use each and every one, and especially the ones that have bumped their heads and they know what it feels like to bump a head. Well, those are the ones that really can give change. So we give those people resources, and those people can turn around and help our communities flourish, because we can get a hold to some of these kids that are losing it, that don't have a big brother or a mentor to look up to. They can become that.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you. Bill, are you ready to answer that question?
Is that okay?
Yep, go right ahead, go right ahead.
Yeah. What is a plan that will economically help African Americans? One of the things I mentioned the other day we had a forum a week ago, Tuesday, League of Women Voters St. Paul. If you look that up on YouTube, League of Women Voters St. Paul, it's on YouTube. University Avenue, I mentioned, doing something that would attract people to the Avenue year-round, 365 days a year, called the Avenue of Flags, from KSTP all the way to Wright Street in the Capitol Building. You have flags of all nations along University Avenue. Each one is 75 feet tall. There's nothing like it on the planet when you do a search for that. That would bring thousands of people, tens of thousands to University Avenue, year-round, daily. And the businesses along there, a lot of them are struggling now since the civil unrest a year and a half ago now, and because of COVID, that would be something that could help. Also, the redevelopment of the Sears site, the idea currently is to knock it down and put in, I think, 4 square blocks of housing. Nice apartment buildings, but there's no jobs associated with that. I'd like to see the Sears building redeveloped into the Museum Mall of Minnesota. There's a lot of museums within this state, and people who have really outstanding collections. A lot of it is cultural. I would like to have one area in the Sears building that allows a satellite location for each of those museums across the state and across the Twin Cities. And one place that people could go, that could provide hundreds of jobs there as well. And then the surrounding area around the Sears site, you excavate that and you put like an outdoor park that allows people to go forward or backward in time within Minnesota's history. That would be hundreds of more jobs involved. It would recreate the geology of Minnesota, the lakes region, forest, prairie, farmlands, but also how human habitation happened within Minnesota, starting with the Native Americans, working into the first Europeans that came.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. We're going to move on.
And then the other ethnic groups. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. We're going to move right on to David. And again, I just want to be clear. David's answer is on behalf of Dora, who is running for mayor.
Thank you. So as far as the question, what is your plan economically for Black people in St. Paul, whether you all know this or not, there's already been a plan in place. It's called the St. Paul Department of Human Rights. That St. Paul Department of Human Rights is charged with making sure that there's opportunities for minorities and people of color to be able to develop not only property but businesses in St. Paul. That department has failed under the current administration, and it doesn't seem like that they're doing anything to try and reorganize that. So under Jones Robinson administration, we are going to reorganize the St. Paul Department of Human Rights, and we are going to make sure that we hire a director of human rights and is holding people accountable, so that way people of color and minorities have that opportunity, because it's in law that we are supposed to have a percentage of development in the city of St. Paul. And that has not happened. It hasn't happened for ever since this administration took office. So the plan, which is the second question that you answered, will happen once we get in office and we can reorganize and make sure that people are being held accountable for what they're supposed to be doing and they're not doing. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We're going to move right on. We're going to move right on to Paul. Paul, you need the question again. I'm pretty sure you know what it is.
Yeah, if I remember, what are we going to do to economically benefit African American people in St. Paul?
Yes, yes. And name one resource you could provide for them as mayor.
Right. So when it comes to economic benefits, you got to have a job. Without a job, you're going nowhere. I'm going to create more jobs for Black Americans in St. Paul because I'm going to support small businesses, a very diverse group of businesses. Especially, I'm going to support minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses. And one of the ways to do that is, as St. Paul mayor, I take a cue from the Hippocratic Oath, and that is to do no harm. If you want to help a business flourish, you don't pile on regulations. You don't put on high licensing fees. You don't burden them with the things that are going to keep them from growing. The other thing when it comes to jobs, I want people to not settle for minimum wage. I want people to aspire to climb that ladder. Minimum wage, you can raise it if you want, but it's still a minimum. And if too many people in a city are working for minimum wage, it becomes a minimum city. You're at the bottom rung of the ladder, no matter what the minimum wage is. I want people to be able to climb that ladder, and to do that is education. So I'm going to foster education programs for business owners, how to run a business, how to make your business grow, how to be successful. And then for young people, education is the best solution to poverty. As far as economic benefit, you can't do it without education. You got to have help from others, you got to have leadership, you got to have mentors, and that's what I'm going to do as St. Paul mayor.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. This is running pretty smoothly, guys. Do you need me to give you the question again? I think you pretty know it pretty well.
What was the first part again?
What is your plan economically for Black people in St. Paul? And could you name one resource you could provide to them as mayor?
I would say particularly I want to focus on Black youth. So when I worked in the school district, there's an opportunity gap for a lot of Black youth. They're falling behind in schools, especially in high schools. I think there needs to be a different track for them to be able to get jobs. One of them is in the trades. There's a lot of opportunity there. So one of the things I would love to do is work with the school board or St. Paul Public Schools. What is the alternative track for Black youth to be able to get good quality jobs that doesn't follow their academic record? You should be able to do this at any given point, at any given time, because there's a lot of things that are challenging than living in the community. So another thing that I want to focus on is giving resources for housing. So like the best way to build wealth for the Black community is to own homes, a single family ownership. So there's a few ways of policies that you can do this. One is giving down payment assistance to buy the first home, and also giving kind of like, not trainings, but like some information of like, what does it take to own a home, take care of it, and considering it as an investment. So that's one of the things, and it also works well for the St. Paul Recovery Act because it's addressing the redlining that really disrupted the opportunity to get investment through housing.
Thank you, Abu. Okay, that looks like that is our round of second questions. I appreciate you guys' answers. We're going to move right on to the third question real fast. The third question is how do you plan to increase home ownership in the Black community, and can you talk about rent control a little bit? Can we start again with Abu?
So home ownership, I already said a little bit about that, so like I don't really necessarily need to repeat that. So there's a few things that I want to say is this. When we think of gentrification, what actually happens is that there's a lot of renters, people of color renters that are living in that space, and therefore they're kind of they're kicked out when the property or the property owner wants to revamp the house to be able to sell it in the marketplace. So I want to make it a requirement for those folks there that if they're kicked out without any, if their lease is terminated, then they get some additional payment for that rent. In other words, you can't just kick out someone just because you're gonna, try to sell it in the marketplace. They should get at least like 1 or 2 months additional rent for your rent being terminated. So that way it sort of protects them. In addition, for the people who are being displaced, they should have first dibs of buying that property and owning there, because that's the way they can stay in that property. So many people don't realize is gentrification is a result of people that don't take care of their property now finally want to take care of it just to sell it to someone else. So how do we protect those residents there? And one way to address communities right now, instead of waiting for gentrification and that to occur, is making a requirement for property owners that are vacant properties or not taking care of their renters right now to penalize them. Put the bigger fee on that you're not exploiting our communities, and wait until there's economic development to take advantage of your, I don't want to say scheme, but like, stop exploiting our communities, simple as that.
Thank you, Abu.
Again, this is something very important. And I'll be very personal with you all. We all want to live the American dream. And owning a home is part of the American dream. Now, some people, if they choose to rent, that's fine. But when you rent, every dollar you pay for rent, you will never see again. When you own a home, you're building equity, you're building wealth. Every dollar you put into your home, it comes back to you. To own a home, you're going to need a mortgage. To get a mortgage, you're going to need a bank account. That's the first step. And so people, as young as they are, get them started in a bank. Get a relationship with your bank, get an account there, teach them how to save their money. Have a relationship so they can start talking when it comes time for a mortgage. You do that, you start to build wealth, you start to put down roots, you start to care about your property, you start to get to know your neighbors, and it's all good. About rent control. Anytime the government uses the word control, you better run. That there's never a good thing. When the government gets involved, you get more of what you don't want and less of what you do want. I'm a big believer in free market pricing. The economic laws of supply and demand, it will find a balance. But when the government tries to control it, the owners of those properties say, well, I'm not making enough. And there you've got a problem, and then you end up with scarcity. So, remember that on election day, call for St. Paul, and we're going to get this city working better again. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. We'll move right on to David, who is representing Dora, who is running for mayor.
Thank you. So, somebody had mentioned down payment assistance program. We have actually drafted a plan in the campaign that's going to provide down payment assistance and a credit builder program that's going to also help people of color be able to compete with everybody else. Because if you have bad credit, that means your interest rate's going to be high. That means your monthly payment's going to be high. So what we're going to do is help you with that to make sure that you can compete with everybody else. And then we're going to also develop those communities and that have housing that are, because I've driven around in neighborhoods in St. Paul that are still boarded up and you know, nothing's happening with any of them. And so we want to, even if the city has to take control of that and build it and then make it affordable so that people of color can also be able to live that American dream. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We're going to move right on the bill.
Thank you. How many of you in this room own your home? Yes. So, if you own something, ladies and gentlemen, would you like the city telling you what you can sell that property for, or do you want to be able to sell that property for the best price you can get? One of the biggest drivers of higher housing costs in St. Paul is the taxes and the fees assessed to that property keep being raised ever higher by your city and your county leadership. If I'm elected in 2 years' time, I want you to have a referendum to vote on that caps the property and property tax and fee increases to the cost of inflation. Relatedly to rental housing, the #1 driver of higher rents has been the costs of owning that property because of the city and the county raising the tax and the fees on that property. That has been passed on to the renters. So if we can get the city spending under control, perhaps through referendums, the rent increases will not have been what they have been. Regarding rent control, my concern is the cost of owning these rental properties is going beyond 3% a year. And so what that's going to do is drive out the smaller folks in this city who own rental properties, and they're going to be replaced with larger entities, many of them from outside this state, who can operate at a smaller margin, but they're more likely to take less care of that property than a local owner will. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. We're going to move right on to Miki.
Yeah, so imagine being able to, first of all, know that you can own your house if your credit score doesn't have to look this way or that way. You know, how about we try to figure out, the first thing that we do is say, people that want to own a home, there's some classes that you can get into to help you to become a homeowner, but they're simple to get into. We know all about them. We know simply how to, whether it's go online or whether it's, you know, go up to your grocery store and look on the wall and see, you know, home ownership classes. You know, we have to first make it accessible for people to be able to know where those classes even take place at. Once we know where they take place at, why don't we try to say, you know, these credit scores that you need to have? What's wrong with bringing them down a little bit? So that people that don't have these good credit scores can still have a chance at purchasing some of those homes too. Why not stop saying that just because this person has a felony or this person lives this way, they can't get into a home, help to save their money up, and then become a homeowner? Because we all know there's a lot of brothers and sisters and just people in general that are out there that would love to be homeowners, but they just need, first of all, a safe space to sit down and start to earn them some money and start to be able to let that money increase into the point where it gets to where they can take that money, become a homeowner, their credit score can build and all that. Well, we don't give them people a chance. We tell them because you made a mistake or because you did this and you did that, you have to stand on these corners. You have to stand in the streets. You have to go from house to house and house to house because you don't have a stable location. So let's first try to stabilize the ability for a person to have just somewhere to lay their heads down at night. And then with that, on top of financial literacy classes and being able to know where I can take some home ownership classes, we take that and we also say with the government, with the city, there's some foreclosed houses out there. Let's give these people that have less than good credit scores a chance to get those houses. You don't need to have this great credit score to get a house.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, Rick. We're going to move right on to our very next question. Again, I appreciate you guys' candor and speediness in regard to answering all my questions tonight. The fourth question is considering St. Paul has the highest health disparity in the state and possibly well into the country, what is your plan to address this health disparity? And we'll start out with Miki.
So, how about we start to say, let's get into these doctor's offices. Let's start to educate each other on how important it is to simply go to the doctors, to file for some insurances. Let's start making insurance for individuals that need the help a lot more affordable. I know myself, there was a period of time that I wasn't able to get insurance, and I had to jump through a bunch of different hoops just to be able to get just simple state insurance, you know, just county insurance. So we definitely have to educate each other enough to know that you need insurance, you need this health insurance. So how do I go about getting it? You know, if we have to change those places instead of just going down to the hospital or even doing it online, maybe create some places right in these communities that's, you know, located close enough where some of these people in the community can just go right over there and give them some insurance and start to, you know, do better and take care of themselves.
Thank you, Ricky. We're going right on the bill.
There's not a simple answer to this. It's one of the things I've talked about repeatedly during the campaign is in our first 90 days, I would like to talk about as openly as possible and with as many people as possible what's working in the city and what's not working in this city. I have strengths in a lot of areas, but there's some that I don't, and I want, this is an issue that will be talked about. I don't have a specific answer for it. There's no magic pill for this question. There isn't. One of the reasons I think the highest is the income is so low. And when the city keeps taking, and the county, more and more people's money, that does keep them in poverty, and that does affect people's health. That's all I have on the issue right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We're going to move on to Davis, and he's answering this question again on behalf of Dora, who's running for mayor.
Thank you. You know, there is a health disparity, and you know, like Bill said, there's no easy answer for it. I think that what our administration would do if we take office with the first 100 days, we would put together a task force to take a look at what it is that we can do, you know, to make that either affordable, accessible. I do know that there is some pay-as-you-go clinics, you know, in St. Paul. I don't know how well those are working. I know the county, Miki mentioned the county option. They're supposed to be able to accept you based on what your income is, and if that's not happening, then I think we have to take a look at that and find out why. But it's such a complex issue that I don't think that any of us would be able to give you an answer tonight as far as how that could happen. But we will appoint a task force to take a look at that in the first 100 days. I think we can have a recommendation to move forward on that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Let's move on to Paul. Let me know if you need me to run that question.
No, I've got this. This is a question that I think about a lot because good health care is a basic human right. Everybody should have it. It goes across every demographic category in the human race. Quite often, part of the problem of not getting adequate health care has to do with money. Sometimes it has to do with convenience. Sometimes it has to do with lack of trust. So I'm going to address all three of those. First of all, with the insurance. This also comes down to economic benefits and good jobs. If you have a good job and your employer pays your health insurance, pays for your, provides a health insurance for you, Okay, that solves a lot of problems. The other thing is convenience. We need more places where people can go for basic health care. And sometimes, so many things, if you catch it early, it never gets bad enough where it gets very, very expensive or leads to surgery or in the hospital or death. So, for most of my life, I've been involved in church work and working with nonprofits. I'm a team builder. I build bridges between organizations. I'm going to create this team of St. Paul churches and nonprofits and community organizations, community centers just like this. And there's going to be periodically, there's going to be a night, you come in and you get your blood pressure checked, free. You come
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Let's go with, Boo. You're the last man on tap, so go ahead and answer this question.
Could you get a clarification, like what exactly is the disparity?
I would say, just overall in general disparities, when it comes down to, clinics, care, and, just doctors and nurses individually.
Yeah, so.
And infant mortality.
Yeah, infant mortality.
Yep, among Black people.
All right, so I probably would say my focus would be on diet. So one of the things is, not to say, so I grew up in the hood as well, so like you eat cheaply, so you get fast food, you get prepackaged food and that sort of thing, and that impacts your health, it impacts how you learn, it impacts your energy levels. And I think what's really beautiful is when you grow your own food. So these urban gardens, so for example, Frogtown Farms, different churches, they provide free produce for people that want to get. And once you taste something fresh, when you cook it yourself and that sort of thing, you eat healthier. That's like part of that process. So, you know, we should definitely have cooking classes of how to cook soul food on your own, you know, and teach kids at an early age of like what is the power of cooking and really and get those benefits associated with that. So I think that's really one of those big focus, because if you don't know what's entering in your body, then you know that impacts a lot of things. And especially in the African American community, there's a lot of high propensity of diabetes and obesity. So like we need to address this problem up front, but it really comes in sort of building the community of eating healthy, and that requires community. That's not just an individual choice. So I think this is where we can really grow the soil. Like I said, Frogtown Farms, there's a huge plot of parkland that, you know, we can sort of build those gardens and really try to get the indigenous roots of the plants themselves. So for example, there's medicinal herbs. So there's a lot of kids that love Minecraft and that sort of thing. And, you know, how do we bring those video game concepts of the plants and medicine and really put them in the real world and really connect them? I think that's
Thank you, Abdul. We're going to move right on to our fifth question real fast, and we'll start with you, Abu. The question is considering that St. Paul is planning to close a number of Black schools in Black neighborhoods, what is your plan to close the education gap?
What is the gap you're talking about? Like, what do you mean? Oh, is in like fill those spaces or what?
Yes. What is your plan to close that ed gap?
My understanding for the education gap, so like I'm going to go back to like when I worked in the school district, there is an achievement gap associated with black kids and white kids. My focus is like, how do we do an alternative? It absolutely makes no sense when kids are falling behind. Instead of them giving them an easier way to pass, we actually, my metaphor is a treadmill. So normal kids are on the treadmill normally, and for kids that are falling behind, the treadmill gets steeper and steeper and steeper to the point that it doesn't make sense to continue on trying to get an education. This is why an alternative platform of working on the trades, that as long as you have the will and desire to learn and want to make something of yourself, that regardless of your academic history, you can pursue this. We need to give kids and youth a second chance. We're talking about education. The current education system is not working. It's not working for our youth, and there's different ways of mentorship for that. And I think when I was door knocking, I've talked to a lot of folks who are high school dropouts, and they made something of themselves because they had the drive, because they had the urge to learn in different ways. And some kids want to do hands-on learning. They're full of activities, they're hustlers, all that other stuff. Just give them a platform. It does not look at prerequisites or the past history. It really gives them a fresh start. That's what we're going to go forward.
Thank you, Boone. We're going to move right on to Paul.
Okay, the education gap. And you all have seen the same news that I did. You know that there are these schools that are closing. We have to ask ourselves a very hard question. If they're closing because of decreased enrollment, well, why do parents not want to send their kids here? So that has to, if they need help, if they need to get up their standards so that they really are a good school, then people will send their kids there. So that's one of the things that has to be evaluated, and it needs to be supported, and we need to give them all the help that they need, because our kids are too precious to let even one get left behind. We got to fight for our kids. We're in this for the kids. I'm running for mayor for the kids as much as anybody. And about this education gap, sometimes there needs to be some help. Sometimes there needs to be tutoring. And I'm going to make you this promise. Every community and rec center, every library, there's going to be tutoring available. When I'm mayor, I don't let the kids down. I don't forget about them. If they need help, I'm going to do everything I can to help them. And I will even volunteer as a tutor. We have to help our kids because they are our future and they are our present. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We're going to go right with David, who is answering again on behalf of Dora, who's running for mayor.
Thank you, sir. As far as the question goes, I need clarification if you're talking about charter schools or public.
We're talking about both because there's a mixture of closings of both, it looks like. So we're talking about closing that gap between private schools and possibly you would be able to answer the question.
Well, first of all, I mean, we would oppose any closing of any schools. And sometimes as candidates, sometimes as public officials, sometimes you have to say, I don't know, I'm gonna have to look into that. Instead of just giving me an answer and it just continues to be the same way that it always is. So I'm gonna tell you that we don't have enough information to be able to support that, but a lack of information allows us to oppose it, and we would have to meet with the superintendent of schools and find out exactly what the issues are and why it is that they want to close the schools, and just exactly what are all the dynamics before we were ready to take a position on it, other than opposing just the concept to close any type of schools.
What is your plan for closing the wealth gap? I mean, the education gap.
Well, can you give me a little bit more on that?
Well, again, it's like a Boo asked. We're talking about public, private schools. What is your plan to close that gap between disparities as far as grades,
graduation
rate,
suspension,
dropout rate?
Well, I think that first you have to have good curriculum in the schools. You have to have good teachers. You have to, now private schools is a different story, because I mean that's something that you have to actually pay for. And with the economic development plan, hopefully that will allow people to make that decision if they want to.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to move right on to Bill.
Folks, we're running for mayor, not school board. The mayor cannot dictate what's going to happen with the education system in St. Paul. The mayor can offer a helping hand. Having again talked to thousands of people these last 229 days, hundreds have brought up the public schools. I've heard from way too many teachers who've left the St. Paul public school system looking for the charter schools or the private schools. and parents who've taken their kids out of the public schools, their number one reason is order is not kept in the classroom. Not in every school, in every classroom, but too often there's not enough order kept in the classroom in these schools. These kids can't learn well if there's not order in the classroom and in the schools. There needs to be respect for the teachers. And then secondly, early on in Mayor Carter's term here, he waived library fines for children in St. Paul, basically saying our kids are at a disadvantage, they don't know how to return library books on time. I'm sorry, I found that insulting, ladies and gentlemen. Our kids are smart enough to return library books on time. They're as smart as the kids in the suburbs. You know, when I was a child, the returning of a library book, the checking out of a library book, was the first responsibility I had outside of home. And I held librarians in higher regard than the teachers. And when they gave you that book and they stamped the due date, that was a serious thing to, you know, that you wanted to follow through on. So taking that away from our kids is not helping them. And then, rec centers and libraries, this is an unending thing. Funding is cut for them. It's like a perpetual thing. There will be full funding for all rec centers and libraries in this city. The people in this city are willing to pay for that. These libraries and rec centers are very, very important places for these kids to be able to go to after school, on weekends, evenings. Full funding will be restored to the libraries and the rec centers.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to move right on to Miki.
I think we need to put these kids in a leadership position more earlier in life. That's going to help them. Why not say that if it's the hiring age now is 14, let's cut that to 13. Let's start giving some of these 13-year-old kids, you know, little 2-3 hours a week jobs. It's not for the money to help the parents out. It's for the confidence that it gives those kids to have a job. At my truth centers, I hire kids right now that are 8, 9, 10 years old. Not that I really need the help, but it's to show them kids that they're wanted, they're needed here at my truth centers. So when they're there, they do things like sweep. They do things like just clean off the tables, but it gives them a sense of pride and it gives them a sense of leadership earlier in life. And I think that's what can help them when it comes to them being better school students. Not only that, let's not get away from the fact that in order to have better school systems, we have to figure out a way to hold more parents accountable for their kids and the actions of their kids. So we can't get away from that. We need to say, you know, whether it's parenting classes, that if a kid is having some problems at school and the school can't seem to figure those situations out, well, then maybe we bring the parent and the school in together and we figure out ways to get both those people on the same page. And I just think that there's ways that we can go about doing that. And me as your mayor, I guarantee I can figure out those ways and make those things happen for our kids in our school system.
Thank you, Miki. We're going to move right on. We only got about a couple of questions left. We appreciate all candidates for coming out and participating tonight. Just you guys bringing yourselves out to the community and address the concerns and the agenda that we have shows that you guys are committed to seeing what's really going on in St. Paul and the city, and we just appreciate that. Moving right on to the question number 6. Considering what happened to George Floyd and a bill not being passed at the federal level, what is your plan in St. Paul to hold police accountable? And we'll start with Miki.
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is create a separate system that has nothing to do with the current police department and what is already in place to keep them in check. So basically, the police system has internal affairs. So we've often seen that the police are not being held accountable, even if some of those cases make it to internal affairs. Well, why not create another system outside of internal affairs that involve community, people like us, that can sit there, review these cases, and we hold a judgment to whether this officer should be suspended or whatnot, because for some odd reason, these officers are doing what they're doing, and they're not being held accountable by their superiors, nor some agencies such as internal affairs. With the George Floyd situation, there should have been no reason why this officer, after having all those infractions, was still able to patrol the streets and murder George Floyd the way that he did. Well, with a separate organization or separate agency that is created by us, the people, to be able to hold those officers accountable despite whatever internal affairs has to say about this, is going to be able to hold those officers accountable. And we have to put together a zero tolerance for any officer that breaks what they're not supposed to do. We can't say, 2, 3 times that's too many. We need to say 1 time is just too many for you to do. And I believe that as mayor, I will create that agency outside of internal affairs and outside the regular police department that can get together and start to hold these police accountable.
Thank you, Miki. We're gonna move right on the bill.
One of the things I wasn't able to get to in an earlier question was something I could help specifically more the African community in St. Paul. I want to see the city's website change, the city's website changed so that people can interact with each other on topic. There's a lot of going back and forth from the neighborhood apps, but that's not able to accomplish anything. Topics such as this, if a situation arises, people who have shown they live in the city of St. Paul would have an opportunity to communicate on the city's website. Other people would see it. And then also they would have the right to vote up or down on the issue or post comments, so things would be flushed out very quickly. I've door knocked, as I said, 191 days, 70% of the city. I could have focused on the highest voter turnout areas in the city. There's a map out there. It's the more affluent areas. Instead, I did 50-50. I also went to the lowest economic areas as well. I did all of Frogtown, all of Batesville, all the way to McKnight, all of the west side. All of Frogtown, these areas, they're not all lower income, but it was very important. I told people there that you mean as much to me as Summit Avenue, and that's why I've come through these areas. I did most of Midway, much of North Rice Street. What I heard again and again, though, is police, the people in these areas, they want a strong police force. They don't want a weaker police force. They wanted to see more patrols. Some of these areas were most requesting the shot spotter technology. And then the one thing I wanted to talk to you about real quick is I've been downtown as a small business owner for 28 years. I've had more than my share of interaction with the police force. Too often over these years, I would say about 30% of the police I had interaction with had a bad attitude. And it got wearing. And the one thing I'm going to say is, because the mayor oversees the police department, appoints the police chief, is you have signed up for an urban gig. Every day you're going to deal with people that have bad days and perhaps bad lives. You always need to come to work with a smile. And if you get tired of it, go to Red Wing or Hastings.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
We're going to move right on to David, who is answering on behalf of Dora, who is running for mayor.
Okay. As far as public safety, first we need to restore the St. Paul police to their capacity. We're short a lot of police, probably around 100, which puts a lot more pressure on the police because they're doing double and triple duty. The dynamics that are happening with people just in general, we're putting this on the police. We're putting a lot of things on the police that they're not really trained for. And so that does not, it doesn't allow them to be the best that they can be, because they're doing other things that they weren't really properly trained for. And we are in favor of the shot spotter technology, which the current administration turned down. All you need to do is fill out a federal grant and we can get the shot spotter technology, and that'll cut down the amount of time that it takes for the police to find out where those shots are being fired, and they can get to it a lot quickly, save lives, and we need to allow our police chief to be able to manage the police department the way he needs to, instead of being micromanaged by the mayor's office. Our current chief is very competent and experienced. We don't support defunding the police. We do support police reform and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We're going to move right on the call.
Let me say this first off very, very clearly. George Floyd's murder never should have happened. Never should have happened. And now as a result, there's been a ripple effect that is damaging the respect for not only police in St. Paul, but also respect for authority. And so as you've seen over the last year, some of the carjackings and some of the shootings and some of the blatant disrespect for law enforcement, it's ravaging our city and people are dying. So as your mayor, the first thing that has to happen is I need to support the police officers that we have. Because too many are leaving and now we're understaffed. And then bring the police force up to capacity. So as mayor, when I am giving our police the manpower and the technology and the tools that they say they need to best do their job, to best protect the citizens of St. Paul, I'm going to do that. Here's what's going to happen. All across our great nation, people are going to hear about me, the new mayor of St. Paul, and police from all over the country will say, hey, I'm going to come to St. Paul. I want to work for this new mayor. When that happens, we're going to get the best and the brightest in law enforcement, the real experts, to come to St. Paul, and that's when we're going to see a real change in our city. Things are going to be safer, the respect is going to be there, and we're going to become the great city that we were always intended to be.
Thank you, Paul. Abu?
So the question about police accountability, what was it again?
Considering what happened to George Floyd and others, what's your plan to hold police accountable?
All right, so just to add what Miki was saying, there is a civilian review board where citizens, St. Paul citizens can review complaints put onto officers and they can evaluate it. They don't have the disciplinary power as the chief does, but they can make a recommendation to the chief. One of the weaknesses of the civilian review board is essentially they see it after the fact of the internal affairs. But anyway, so my solution to this approach to this is we need to put police liability insurance of some way, some shape or form. So for example, for doctors, they have maladaptive malpractice insurance. So if they perform poorly in their job, their insurance keeps on increasing until the point they can't be a doctor anymore. So likewise, for those officers that have a history of excessive use of force, every time they do this, they increase their insurance that they cannot be in the department anymore. And it's a little bit complex on how to implement something like this. I just want to add something why this makes sense for the city or a mayor to look into this, is that for the George Floyd murder case, the city, the residents, the taxpayers of Minneapolis spent $27 million in a civil lawsuit. So it's the best interest for the city to sort of figure out how do we hedge the cost or burden toward the police officers that they are responding responsibly. So ideally, I want to do a policy where the police federation has a choice in how.
Thank you, Abu. Thank you. Thank you. We've got one question left, and we want to give each candidate time to kind of give a closing argument on why you should be mayor. So I'm gonna cut it down to about 45 seconds for this last question. It kind of coincides with the whole police reform deal, and also crime in general. Considering what is your plan to address the high gun violence that we've seen in St. Paul? And we'll start with Abu.
You say you're going to give us a moment to think, or?
Well, I mean, it's a basic question. We're giving you we're just giving you about 45 seconds to answer.
Yeah, I got it. So for the gun violence is, we got to stop the illegal guns that are being transferred for youth. So this is where funding of the police department allows that. So right now, the crime gang unit is at 50% capacity. This is a result of underfunding of the police department. And that part of that is they build room. So the long-term solution is how do we build a relationship between citizens and officers? So I want to put a policy that 30% of paid time for patrol officers is engaging with citizens. So this is where officers will be walking around the streets in plain clothes, having conversations with neighbors, and also figuring out where the hot spots are occurring on, and also be engaged in community youth events.
Thank you, Abu. We're going to move right on to Paul.
Many of you saw the news reports last night, just like I did, in that mass shooting that happened on West 7th Street at the Truck Park Bar, which is just down the street from where I live. One of the guns was provided by a straw purchaser. So people that aren't supposed to have guns, they're getting guns by way of these straw purchasers. So that has to stop, and the screws need to be tightened so that at the first indication that somebody is buying guns and giving them to those that are not supposed to have them by law, that needs to be stopped and people need to go to jail.
Thank you, Paul. We're gonna go right with David, who's answering on behalf of Dora, who's running for mayor.
Thank you. I answered some of this at the last question, as far as the defunding of the police, I mean, and having a lack of officers out there. But more than that, it's failed policies. It's weak leadership that makes people feel emboldened to walk into a West 7th neighborhood, Frog Town, wherever it is in St. Paul, and start shooting people and start killing people. And it's because of failed policies. I mean, that doesn't happen in every city in Minnesota, but it happens a lot in Minneapolis and
Thank you,
St. Paul.
David. Thank you. Thank you. We're gonna move right on the bill.
At our first forum a week ago Tuesday, I asked Mayor Carter about, he had a break-in of his home while he was campaigning, and I asked if he had 3 unsecured guns in that home that were also unregistered with 4 children in the house. We had a back and forth, and I think at the end he said there were none. Well, there were 3 unregistered guns in his home. There's a police report out there. Numerous people have told me it exists. The truck bar, there was illegal drinking. It was growing for weeks and months outside of the truck bar on the sidewalk, and nothing was being done about it. The mayor is having the police stand back as these low-level crimes are occurring. I ran into a fellow named Mr. Hernandez. He lives east of Lake Phelan. He ended up in jail. And then he straightened his life out. He now owns his own business. He owns his own house. He's only 30 or so. He is grateful for the intervention that was given him at that time. Thank you.
Let's go right to Miki.
So probably gun buyback programs definitely would be helpful. We definitely need to do that. We definitely need to take some of these individuals that are from these communities, that's from this violence, that see this violence on an everyday basis, and if they're ready to change their lives, then we give them an opportunity to come on this side and start to help the police officers out by being able to assist them on calls and whatever it may take to be able to, show that they can help with this crime and the shooting that's going on in the neighborhoods. But we also have to understand that a lot of these deaths that take place are financial gain to some people. So everybody that cries wolf is really not scared of the wolf. So we need to understand that a lot of those guns that are coming into this city are going to always come into this city because we don't have the ability to stop them, because there's a lot of people that are in higher places that are going to make sure those guns get here so they can continue to be used to kill each other.
Thank you, Miki. Thank you, thank you. Again, that's it for our questioning tonight. We really do.
You guys have time for like 3 questions from the audience?
I do.
Yeah. Are there any
Sure,
questions?
go ahead.
If any of the audience members have a question, please stand up. Please go ahead and stand up and go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, 3.
So, Bill, you were speaking in reference to the Sears building. Are you aware that the Sears building has already been bought out by someone in New York, and that they've already got a development plan for the Sears building?
I am aware that there's a development plan. I think they're in the process of soliciting public input as far as what could happen there. There should be discussion. Do we turn that into a job creating site or 4 square blocks of wood frame box apartments? That conversation should be happening. The citizens aren't having a voice in this. That's where I just mentioned earlier, this is a topic that people should be able to interact with each other on the city's website. Do they want to see a wood frame box apartment buildings up there, or would you like to see something extraordinary on that site that would create hundreds of jobs, year-round jobs?
Thank you, Bill. Does anybody else want to answer that question? Okay, do we have another question from the audience?
I have a question. Do you guys know what the definition of reparations is? Or like, can you tell me what you think the definition is?
Real fast, if everybody wants to answer that real quick. Yes, you can, Bill.
I think it's awarding money to individuals who are ancestors. You asked me a question and you're shaking your head no.
You can still answer the question.
I know that, but you're asking me for my opinion and you're shaking no as I'm speaking.
I'm asking if you know the definition of reparations. Not your own opinion, what you know the definition of reparations. I'm
explaining what I think my definition is.
Go ahead.
It's the awarding of funds to descendants of slaves. The descendants of slaves that were here in America back in the early part of the city's history, awarding funds who are here today to those descendants.
Thank you, Bill. Does anybody else want to answer?
So the definition of it, in some terms, could be looked at differently. But for what I do know is it's creating an opportunity, whether it's financial, whether it's through structured basis, it's a whole, it's not just one in particular piece that is used to make sure that a group of people are taken care of financially. It's to be able to help a group of people, whether it's to gain structures, whether it's to be there financially help them, it's to make sure that they can start to build a generational wealth amongst themselves as people from all different aspects of life.
Thank you, Miki. Let's move right on to the next question and the final question.
Would you like a response from each of us?
Well, I think it's just simply to restore back something that was taken from somebody, and that's the descendant of slaves. I mean, it's to restore us to a whole situation. I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's a short answer.
The short answer is restore and repair. My long answer is this is important, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you over lunch sometime, my treat.
It's sort of compensating for the injustices of the past. So reparations existed for Japanese Americans after World War II. What was put into not internment camps, but I forgot what they're exactly called. Maybe not concentrated, they're internment camps. So it's compensation for abuses of the past.
Okay. Again, I just want to thank all candidates, all you guys, for showing up tonight and participating in tonight's event. We want to take 1 minute now. Each of you guys, we want to give you guys a minute real fast to
closing statement.
Give a closing statement and talk about why you should be mayor of the city of St. Paul.
So I should be the mayor for St. Paul because I'm a community organizer. The point of, so for example, I organize cleanups. So I organize neighborhood cleanups where residents in the community are coming together to clean up their neighborhood. And the point of this is that they build pride. They take opportunity to beautify their neighborhood, that when they walk their dog or walk in the street, they see this and like, yes, I did this. I'm part of this. I did something, and it creates beauty, it creates power. So if elected for mayor, I want to do a citywide door-knocking effort to reach out to every citizen and ask them, how do you want to be involved? One of the questions I ask residents is, do you feel like you belong in the community? And residents recognize that a sense of belonging is not something that can be handed to you. It is something you contribute to. And so what I would love to do is find these assets in our community and really expand upon them, and really give them opportunity to succeed. As I was mentioning about in...
Thank you, Abu. We appreciate it. Good luck.
Thank you. The reason I'm running for St. Paul is because I love this city, and I love the people of this city. everybody. I lived my entire adult life here, and I plan to live the rest of my life here in St. Paul. I love this city. Because of that, I want to be a mayor and make this a better city. I'm going to provide the leadership. I'm going to reduce the crime, and I'm going to increase safety. I'm going to help small businesses flourish. I'm going to renew that infrastructure. And in honor of our veterans, I'm bringing back 4th of July fireworks to honor our veterans who served and sacrificed. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And we're going to go with David on behalf of Dora Jones, who is running for mayor.
Dora Jones Robinson loves the city of St. Paul. And she's got a track record for boots on the ground. She's made a difference in people's lives, especially with the youth. And I want to say this, the city of St. Paul is a great city, but we can do better. St. Paul sadly has become a war zone of failed policies and weak leadership, but we can do better. Businesses are failing and the successful ones are leaving because the current government is not business friendly and don't make them feel welcome. If you're not a part of their inner circle, then you're on your own. We can do better than that. We can turn all this around in a very short order, but we need you to do one thing. In early voting, we need you to vote Dora Jones Robinson for St. Paul Mayor, and on November 2nd, we need you to vote Dora Jones Robinson for St. Paul Mayor. Thank you for being here, and
thank you, David.
Good luck to everybody.
Thank you, David. We're going to move right on to Bill.
It's been a pleasure to be here tonight. For those of you who didn't get a flyer beforehand, I will hang around and be happy to give it to you and talk to you. 4th of July fireworks, I mentioned to Mayor Carter back in 2019, we need to get them back. Thanks for adopting part of my platform, Paul. I've been talking about it since February. All for St. Paul, with those signs outside. A team builder, we were a team respecting the law about placement of lawn signs. It's going to build businesses. All I can tell you is business is not in the city of St. Paul. Mine has been in the city of St. Paul for 28 years. Ranked, let's see here. We have ranked choice voting. A lot of us don't like it, but folks, make it work for you if you want to change in the city. I hope you'll vote for me first, but if there's somebody else, that's great. Somebody second, great. Rank me second, rank me third. But if you want change in the city, you do need to rank us. And that it's time for a change in the city, St. folks. It's time we place St. Paul back onto a higher track again.
Appreciate that, Bill. Thank you.
I say vote for me because I have a history and I know how to bring people together again. That's what we've lost. We've all done this, pointing our fingers at everybody, and nobody's taking time to start to bring us back together and unify us as a people. And I know that I can do that despite whatever background or faith and belief that you may have. It doesn't matter. It's about us all coming back together as one. For two, the public safety, the issue that we're having with these guns and the violence, I can reach those kids that's in these communities that's plaguing all of us. I have the ability to get down into these communities, and I'm not scared to stand face to face with somebody that has a weapon threatening to use it. That's what my job does every day with the 8 to 18 Truth Center and my abilities to bring kids together. I also know that the school systems, if I can, they need help, whether it's mental health workers and people there to provide for them and those students and what is going to be needed for those students to get back on track. And the best thing about me is me working and doing what I do with my organization, 8 to 18 Truth Center, is I don't mind doing that. I don't mind saving these kids from day to day. So if I am elected mayor, I don't mind going to tell those people up there that this is what needs to happen, this is what needs to change. Because the worst thing they can do to me is send me back down to work and continue to do my thing with the 8 to 18 Truth Center. And I'm not scared to lose that. So if I'm in and I'm that mayor, hey, maybe I might be a one-term mayor because I'm going to go get those resources that these communities need, and I'm bringing them back to y'all. Win or lose.
Thank you, Miki. I just want to say real fast, yes, we do appreciate all you candidates for coming out and participating, but you wouldn't be here without the citizens that are here to listen to what your values and what your agenda is. So I want to definitely give a shout out to all the citizens that stay here and listen to you guys, because they deserve a good mayor, and they want to know exactly what kind of mayor they're going to get. So I appreciate you guys for staying and participating and even asking questions. And just thank you on behalf of the St. Paul Recovery Act, and everybody have a good night.